My name's Kelly Leftree. I am the Head of Pharmacy, Pharmaceutical and Regulatory Sciences at the University of Hertfordshire, so just down the road. And today I'm here, thanks to some money. We should really thank Health Education England, who have funded this collaboration between ourselves and with Hertfordshire and West Essex Integrated Care System. So we're coming together to be able to help this afternoon. So I might be the face of today, which is quite unfortunate, but also I really have to thank Kathy and the work that her and her team have done, because this has been a collaboration in coming together today. So welcome everybody. And we're going to be trying to talk about sort of the MPharm clinical placements. So the fact that there are new initial education training standards for pharmacists, and this is kind of an idea to be able to start working towards that, and for you to start to understand what that means, both for us as a university, but also for you as our stakeholders and people who will be helping us to train the future pharmacists. So these are the new IETP standards, the Initial Education and Training for Pharmacists standards, and this is what came about. And they're new, they're 2021 is when they were produced. And you'll see in a minute that the first cohort who will be graduating from these are those that started in September 2021. Read from that what you like. So these new standards, those of you that are familiar with the old, I don't know whether or not you're familiar with the old standards, but there used to be two separate sets of standards. So there used to be a set of standards that we used to have to meet within the MPharm, the Master of Pharmacy, for the first 4 years. And then there was another set of standards which was around pre-reg. I can still call it pre-reg because I'm talking in the past tense. So around pre-reg. So the idea behind these new standards, the first thing is that there would be a set of learning outcomes which were the same, that covered the whole 5 years of training. So the whole 5 years of training would be under the same set of learning outcomes. But there would be 2 points at which we assess the level that the students are at to see whether or not that is appropriate or not. And those levels would be at the end of the 4th year, so at the end of the MPharm, and then again at the end of the foundation year. I have to call it foundation year now because I'm talking in the present. So that's the key thing that has changed. So there are now 55 learning outcomes, and I'll explain them in a little bit more detail in a minute. I'm not going to read them out, but I can send you out the information if you want to go and have a look for it to see where they are, okay? So, pre-reg has therefore become the foundation year, and that's already happened. We've already started to use that. There's lots of things that have already changed over, with the exception of the GPHC email address, which is still pre-reg at GPHC, but we'll... which is relatively interesting, I think. And the idea is that the whole period on the way through is supposed to be strengthening the collaboration. So there's supposed to be a strengthened collaboration between the higher education institutions, such as ourselves, the statutory bodies, so Health Education England in our case, and also our stakeholders. So trying to work together in partnership. Now, if you've listened to information around pharmacy education for any length of time, you'll be aware that there used to be a big push to get this 5-year integrated degree. That's been a bit of a push moving forward, that actually that's what people would like. So there was a massive consultation, which I guess is where this comes from, where they were looking at that. And the practicalities of a 5-year integrated degree were such that actually the decision was made to keep it as a 4+1 model. And that's for various reasons, but some of which are for the actual student themselves. So at the minute, the student themselves pays for 4 years of education, graduates, and then is employed for 1 year and gets money. If we changed it to a 5-year integrated programme, they would pay for 5 years of funding. And at the minute, pharmacy isn't the most attractive career to get into. And if you're trying to think about whether or not people would pay for 5 years and not get that money, there was a decision around that. There's also a difference as to whether or not who would then regulate the placements, because that would then become part of the degree. And there's the complicatedness of that. and the decision as to whether or not there would be a coterminous graduation and pre-reg at the time. So there are some universities who still do an integrated programme. There are a few of them who started it because they thought that's where it was going, and it hasn't. But the model now is still a 4+1, with the decision that actually that 1 year at the end, the foundation year at the end, is still what's going on. But they have combined the learning outcomes, and I think that that's what's important. As I said earlier, this applies to all graduates who started their programme in 2021. So they are graduating in 2025, which is interesting because the GPHC came to visit us to do their Part 1 accreditation, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, in July 2022. At which point our students had already finished their first year on a new programme that we hadn't written yet. I'm still smiling. I promise you it was more of a grimace at the time. So the idea behind the new standards is that they're based around the exact same standards that pharmacy professionals are based around. So around safe, effective care, around partner working, effective communication, and they're looking at that. And what's actually happened is that we've ended up with what's called 4 domains. So the 55 learning outcomes fall into 4 categories. They are person-centred care and collaboration, professional practice, leadership and management, and education and research. So the traditional MPharm from previous, the standards that we've used before, have been very much around very specific areas of practice. So people can use pharmacology, people can use pharmaceutical sciences that they know about formulations. The learning outcomes now are very much competency-based, and they work their way through. And this triangle here is Miller's triangle, which the GPHC love, and this allows you to look at different levels. So with knows at the bottom, so a student knows how to do something, or they know how to do something, they're able to show how to do something, or they're able to do something. And at the beginning I said that there is a difference between the MPharm and the pre-registration areas. It's this area of Miller's triangle that changes. So the 55 areas still under here. Now some of them are a bit odd, like they can manage conflict in an area. And it's just like, I have no idea how they're going to demonstrate that. But the key thing is that they're competent and that they're sign-offs. Whereas before it used to be quite, we could always test these in exam, because actually out of the 55, by the end of the first year, and I can't remember the exact number off my head, but I think it's about 43 of them need to be at shows how and above. And the only way you can demonstrate that is on placements or through OSCEs or through something simulated, because it's such a bizarre thing that they're never going to see in practice. So if you imagine, we personally got over 100 students trying to learn or sign off all of these things. Across the board, there are so many people who are going to be able to do that. So the difference is that the majority of them are sort of shows how or knows how. It then moves up to a lot more of them that does within the scope of the foundation year, if that makes sense. The key changes when we look at what was sort of within there and what the expectations are, there is a change around recruitment and selection, and that is because all recruitment at universities now needs to be value-based, because there is NHS funding associated with it with regards to clinical tariff. So before, I have to say that I've always felt that the University of Hertfordshire have always had a value-based recruitment, but now it's officially a value-based recruitment. And actually the small change we have to make is that we used to do group interviews, and now we've been asked to do individual interviews. So people can show that value base rather than just sort of hiding in the corner. There is a real massive emphasis on equality, diversity and fairness. Students will need to be prescriber ready, because in 2025 the graduates will complete their foundation year and they will become prescribers at the same time that they become as pharmacists in 2026, which is huge. So there's obviously quite a lot that needs changing with regards to that. And to try and help us with that, there was a requirement to have an increased inequality of placements. Now, what was really useful is that nobody said how many placements that was. Absolutely no clue at all. Just more. Thanks, that's massively helpful when we're trying to write a programme. So what I'm going to explain to you today is I'm going to explain to you what we have done at the University of Hertfordshire. I know that some of my colleagues in other universities, I meet regularly with Pharmacy School Council, which is the heads of all schools of pharmacy. So we get together quite regularly. We're a collaborative bunch. We're not in competition with each other. We try to support each other. And that's where we've all kind of come up with the similar idea. It might not be the same pattern, but we have tried to come up with a similar idea of the number of weeks. The other thing that changed specifically is the way that we have been re-accredited as a School of Pharmacy. I'm not going to read all of this out to you, but just to be aware. So re-accreditation in the past has always been that the GPHC would come out to visit us. It's a 2 to 3 day process. We have to go through, we have to prove how we're meeting each of them. A few people in the room have been involved, thank you. It's not pleasant by any stretch of the imagination. They come in and they assess us against different things, and then that's it. We get accreditation for 6 years. They come back after 3 years and do an interim visit, unless there's a major problem. Because we've had to bring this in, what we've had to do is we've had to do a Part 1 accreditation, which is where we've told them what we're expecting to do. They're going to come back and do the Part 2 next year. So that's something else for us to look forward to as a School of Pharmacy. So that's kind of where we've gone with it. So we have taken the decision to obviously make some changes. We've had to make some massive changes. We've got to fit a prescribing curriculum into our already extremely full curriculum. You know, pharmacy is not the sort of course you study if you want to be watching daytime telly. That's always been the case. So to try and fit that in, that's where some of it has come from. And actually that's kind of where the placements is coming in from. Because to create the room in our curriculum for the increased amount of placements and for the prescribing curriculum, we're having to move some of the learning that we would normally do in a classroom to the placement. Now, I'm not expecting anybody to suddenly become lecturers and start to talk about Krebs' cycle, unless you desperately want to. but it's the sort of thing like before we perhaps would spend an hour talking about CD registers. That's the sort of thing that actually we can say, are you able, during the placement, are you able to look at the CD register? Are you able to perhaps fill one out or under the supervision or have a practice? Do you see what I mean? So it's those sorts of tasks that we're kind of thinking at. So our programme looks like this. We have a preparation for practice, which includes our placements down the side, which is 0 credits, and that's where students go through. In the first year, it's very much around the patient, the pharmacist, drugs and medicine, so that's sort of physiology, pharmacology. They're very separate. But as we work our way through, we become a lot more cohesive in regards to what's the word I'm looking for? Integrated. Thank you. the integration of how to work. And the GPHC want a spiral curriculum, which is that we retouch on everything. So you start simple, and then you go back and you go back. So for example, when we're teaching drug interactions in the second year, when we first start, we look at a drug that interacts with another drug. There is a clear example of something that would be better. So for example, warfarin and cimetidine. There is a clear example that actually the patient would be better off on ranitidine or any of the other things that you can think of. But there is a clear example of where to go. Then when we revisit drug interactions in the third year, perhaps the patient has comorbidities or it gets slightly more complicated. And then when we revisit it again in the fourth year, by that point, we're actually having to think, well, the patient's going to have to take both of these drugs. What are we going to do about it? So that sort of makes sense. So as part of it, I have put it up here, we decided not to go with 1, 2, 3, 4. We've actually decided to go with real names for modules, so they do what they say on the tin, because the students found that very confusing, but that's not there. The project we've moved into the third year, because pretty much every other degree programme does a level 6 project. I did a level 6 project because I did a 3-year degree. So it works there, and then that allows us more time in the 4th year to be able to do our clinical skills, to be able to do the different things that we need to do. So the key changes are the placements that we've got to increase. We've realigned the 3rd year modules so they make a bit more sense, and we've separated them out so they're in semester A and semester B, so students aren't doing everything at the same time against their project. We have a new module which is called Pharmacy Law and Prescribing Governance, which is allow us to look at the prescribing elements of those things. We've realigned the 4th year modules. We have a new module which is clinical skills for pharmacists, and this is the competency based one in the final year where they get signed off against the 50 credits. That is pass or fail. There's no mark associated with it. You either pass the module or you don't pass the module. So you can either get an MPharm or you don't get an MPharm. So that allows us that clinical safety thing that we feel at that point. And the other thing that we've done a lot of work on is around decolonising our curriculum. So we're working with stakeholders, we're working with our students to make sure that we're not Eurocentric, that we're using different examples of different skin colours when we're talking about skin conditions, that we're using different foodstuffs. So actually people are getting used to the idea that it's all very well telling somebody about... My mum had a cardiovascular event in Greece and was told not to eat goat. She's like, well, that's great, I don't eat goat anyway. But actually, some people do. And therefore, it's about translating it across to make sure that things make sense. So we've done quite a lot of work around that, making sure that our case studies are all appropriate and that that everybody isn't John Smith, who's a white 40-year-old male. And I think that's really important as well. So the way that it's going to roll out is this year, we've already got 1st year and 2nd year doing our new standards. They're a bit of a hybrid. So they're a bit of a combo of what the old thing was with a little bit of the new bit in with them, if I'm being honest. Our 3rd and 4th years are still on the 2011 standards. Next year, we'll actually roll out, and we will actually be doing the proper new 1st, 2nd and 3rd year, because the 1st and 2nd year currently are being prepped, ready for that. But we will still be rolling our old 4th year. So that's where we are at that point. Okay, so when we're talking about placements in a bit, you'll see the 3rd year placements next year, but you won't see the 4th year placements, if that makes sense. And then the year after that will be when we fully roll out, and we'll see our first set of students on that. Now, I just wanted to talk just very quickly, because I've been given my warning that the video is about to run out, that we're trying to embed the foundation knowledge. So there's been an awful lot of work with HEE, with Pharmaceutical Council, where we've actually come up with an initial education training pharmacist prescribing curriculum. And we have worked out at what stage we all think, because nobody gave us that information, but as schools of pharmacy, we have agreed at what point they should be at when they leave us. So we have come up with what we think should be involved with prescribing consultation, what we think should be involved with prescribing governance, and what physical and clinical skills we think that they should have by the time that they leave us. So everybody is leaving us at the same time. And there are key things around prescribing consultation that are in there. Again, I can send this document out to everybody if you're interested. But it's around making sure that the structure of the consultation, but also things around shared decision making. So we're giving people the skills to be able to do that as well. I think that's really important. About making sure they understand their own prescribing, recognising influences, so health belief models, sustainability, all these things that are going to be including within that, and working with a healthcare team. So we've already doing some of this stuff, but it's moving forward with that. And then, but sort of general skills, so, but also things like therapeutic interventions, so maybe thinking about vaccinations and vaccination skills as well. So just lots of different skills. These don't all have to happen on placement. We'll obviously be teaching some of them in-house. We have a physician's associate team and a team of postgrad medics, and they've already been very heavily involved in the design of what our modules will look like and where they're going. But I think the key thing is that the assessment will be both on clinical knowledge, but also on prescribing consultation, prescribing governance, and we'll be having to assess those physical and clinical skills as well. Some of which will be out in placement, some of which will be at the university.